50 years ago and 6 years after his retirement from politics, former Vice President Richard Nixon was elected the 37th President of the United States. His election has been called the greatest political comeback in American history. One America's Neil W. McCabe has more from Washington.
Members of Richard Nixon's private circle joined dozens of alumni of the Nixon administration at the National Archives in Washington for a look back at that remarkable 1968 campaign.
Mr. Nixon is appearing in the doorway now, preceded by members of his staff and members of the Secret Service.
Having lost a close one 8 years ago and having won a close one this year, I can say this: winning's a lot more fun.
Four members of the Nixon campaign inner circle, Patrick J. Buchanan, Dwight Chapin, Ken Kachikian, and Annalise Anderson, along with former Nixon White House lawyer Jeff Shepard, came together 50 years after their boss won the White House.
Nixon rose to make himself not only President of the United States, but the greatest landslide in American presidential history, given what he had gone through and the opposition he had. I think it's just a political figure. I think it's been said incorrectly, is the dominant figure of the third quarter of the 20th century.
Sure. Nixon ran for president in 1968, 8 years after he lost the 1960 presidential election to Senator John F. Kennedy. Nixon's first comeback attempt was in 1962 when he lost the California governor's race that ended in a bitter press conference that he said would be his last ever.
But as I leave you, I want you to know, just think how much you're going to be missing. You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore.
Dwight Chapin was Nixon's personal assistant, and he told One American News after Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, Nixon realized things had changed.
And he had had the defeat of 1960, the defeat of 1962. He had spent all that time from 62 onward, after the death of Jack Kennedy, particularly getting with the Goldwater effort, working his tail off to become President of the United States, and he had no intention of losing.
Nixon didn't have time to launch a presidential campaign in the next cycle, but in 1964 and 66, he campaigned for Republicans, winning the loyalty of the base, although to the general public, he was still retired, Chapin said.
The takeaway lesson of the 1968 campaign, two things: persistence and strategy. Nixon, he was determined. He knew what he wanted to do, and he had spent years, in his wilderness years, putting a plan together. It is not something that one does on the spur of the moment and is successful.
Patrick Buchanan said Nixon's victory in 1968 was the greatest political comeback in American political history. It was not his last victory. In 1972, Nixon won his second term with 49 of 50 states. But of course, the establishment never accepted Nixon as president. And less than 2 years after that landslide, he was railroaded out of office. Neil W. McCabe, One American News at the National Archives in Washington.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.